Lena Hart was the kind of 12-year-old most people overlooked without meaning to. Quiet, small, always tucked behind a curtain of coppery hair, she walked through life like she was trying not to disturb it. But anyone who really knew her, anyone who bothered to look, would see that she carried a whole different world behind her eyes. Her sketchbook told the story. Every page was filled with airplanes. Sleek ones, bulky ones, passenger jets, warbirds, gliders, cargo haulers. She drew wings with the detail of a mechanic and the awe of a dreamer. Her pencils lived in the spaces between rivets and panels. She sketched engines like other kids doodled hearts and stars. She didn't love planes because they were cool. She loved them because they made sense. While school felt loud and unpredictable, airplanes were honest. If something was broken, a machine told you the truth. It clanged, it groaned, it smoked. It didn't pretend to smile when it was hurting. Maybe that was why she felt so at home in the hangar with her dad. Every Saturday she traded cartoons and sleep-ins for the smell of oil, the echo of distant tools, and the warmth of sunlight hitting aluminum fuselages. Her father, big hands, gentle voice, never talked down to her. He'd tap the underside of a wing and say things like, "Hear that? Means the panel's loose," or "See this? If this line fails, the whole control system goes with it." Other kids learned piano or soccer. Lena learned hydraulics. She learned to listen for the difference between normal vibration and dangerous vibration. She learned to spot fatigue, cracks the width of a hair. She learned that airplanes weren't delicate, they were brave. And she loved them for it. So when her class boarded the small charter plane that Friday morning for their science center field trip, Lena wasn't thinking about the snacks or who she'd sit with. She was thinking about the sound the engines made during startup. Most of her classmates were hyped, snapping selfies, shouting across the aisle, passing notes that would definitely be confiscated. Her teacher, Mrs. Koenig, kept repeating the same phrase she always used on trips. "Inside voices, please." But Lena barely noticed any of it. She was too busy admiring the aircraft. It was a twin-engine turboprop, older but well-maintained, the kind of plane her dad always called a workhorse. The fuselage gleamed in the morning light, and the propellers, when they kicked into motion, created a hum that settled deep in her chest, comforting, familiar. She sat by the window, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes locked on the wing. Everyone else saw metal. She saw a living thing. The plane taxied, bumped slightly as it hit the patch pavement, then rolled faster and faster until the world peeled away from the earth. Kids cheered, someone clapped, and Mrs. Koenig said, "See, that wasn't so bad." Lena smiled softly. If only people understood how many things had to work perfectly for that moment to exist. At 7,000 feet, the plane leveled. Clouds drifted lazily below them. The kids traded gum wrappers, laughed about whose ears popped, and argued about who had called dibs on the left side of the plane. Lena tuned them out. She watched the wing respond to the air, watched the subtle flecks of metal, watched how the flaps had been set. She admired how the sunlight refracted across the rivets. She paid attention. She always paid attention. About 20 minutes into the flight, something changed. It was subtle, so subtle no one else reacted. A tiny tremor. A metallic vibration beneath her seat. A noise too sharp, too hollow, too wrong. The kind of noise you only learn to recognize after spending years in a hangar. Lena's eyes shot to the wing. At first, everything looked normal. The clouds still drifted peacefully. Her classmates still laughed about snacks. A boy near the front was trying to impress someone by pretending he knew how to fly the plane. But she couldn't shake it. She leaned closer to the window, forehead pressing against the cool glass. There, a slight twitch at the edge of the left aileron. It wasn't moving as smoothly as the right one. It lagged by a fraction of a second, like something was resisting it. She frowned. Her chest tightened. Don't jump to conclusions, she told herself. Planes rattled, air currents shifted, sometimes parts moved unevenly. But then, a second noise. This one wasn't subtle. A loud, violent bang echoed beneath the floor. The kind of bang that made the overhead storage bins rattle and the drink cart lurch in its place. Kids screamed. Mrs. Koenig shouted, "Stay seated." The plane dipped hard, not enough to drop masks or send people flying, but enough to send waves of panic through the aisle. Lena's blood ran cold. That wasn't turbulence. That was mechanical. The lights above flickered once, twice. The engines shifted pitch, but not evenly. One sounded strained, the other normal. The fuselage creaked under sudden stress. She knew this combination of symptoms. Knew it too well. Her father had once shown her an aileron actuator that had failed during a ground test. He tapped the broken piece and said, "If this ever snaps in the air, the pilot's going to feel it instantly, and so will everyone else." That was the sound she'd just heard. A shiver crawled up Lena's spine. She wasn't an expert, she wasn't a pilot, she was just a kid. But she knew what she knew. And right now, the left aileron wasn't responding. The plane tilted again, harder this time. Passengers yelled, grabbing armrests as loose items bounced around the cabin. Lena's heart pounded, but her mind sharpened. Every detail in her field of vision became crystal clear. The trembling wing, the sluggish aileron, the slight leftward drift they couldn't seem to correct. The intercom crackled. A shaky voice, one of the pilots, said, "Folks, we're experiencing a minor control issue. Please remain seated." Minor. It was not minor. A kid sitting one row ahead whispered, "Are we gonna crash?" Another said, "It's just bumpy, right." But Lena barely heard them. She was staring at the cockpit door, because for a split second it had opened. Not wide, just a crack. Enough for her to glimpse a pale face, sweaty hands, a pilot wiping his brow like the situation was much worse than he'd admitted over the intercom. The door shut again. But something else happened. The pilot, before closing the door, looked directly at her. And she didn't know why. Maybe he saw how calm she was. Or maybe he saw the way she was studying the wing. Maybe he recognized something: fear, focus, knowledge. She didn't know. But that look stuck in her. Like he knew she knew. The plane shuddered again, dropping a few feet. Gasps rippled through the cabin. A backpack flew off a seat and slid down the aisle. Lena squeezed her eyes shut for a moment. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "If something feels wrong in the air, don't ignore it. Machines don't break quietly." She opened her eyes. She knew exactly what had broken. And she knew, with a sinking feeling deep in her stomach, that this flight was in trouble. Serious trouble. Outside the window, the left aileron twitched once, then froze completely. And that's when Lena realized. The pilots had just lost partial control of the plane. And she might be the only person on board who understood what that meant. The moment the aileron held still, a wave of pure, raw panic swept through the cabin. Lena's heart thundered in her ears like an airplane engine revving up. Her breath came too fast, too shallow. Around her, backpacks slid across the floor, seatbelts locked tight, and shouts echoed off the ceiling. "Stay calm," Mrs. Koenig's voice cracked, high-pitched from fear and effort. She gripped the arms of her seat, knuckles white. "Everyone, just breathe. We'll land soon." A boy, too, rose ahead, vomited quietly, his face turning green. A girl next to him wept, clutching her mother's hand. Lena glanced at their faces, wide eyes, trembling lips. The reality of being trapped hundreds of feet in the air in a metal tube tethered only by thin wings, felt suddenly, terrifyingly fragile. Then the intercom crackled again. The voice of one of the pilots came, shaky but trying to sound reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We're working to restore control." But Lena knew better than to believe working. Not yet. She pressed her forehead to the cool window, watching the wing tremble. Clouds drifted past, innocent and calm, as if they knew nothing had gone terribly wrong inside the plane. The sun overhead cast sharp light on the surface of the wing, allowing her to see minute details, the bending of riveted sections, the crease where metal met metal. Her stomach twisted. That twitch she'd seen in the aileron was more than she had first thought. Something inside the mechanism was resisting movement, perhaps binding. Beside her, another passenger whispered, "They didn't tell us what's happening." His tone was trembling, urgent. Someone else muttered, "They're hiding it." Lena's own voice felt small when she answered, but she said it anyway. "There's something wrong with the wing." She kept her eyes on the aileron, trying to steady her breathing. Suddenly, one of the flight attendants stumbled past. Her high heels clicked unevenly, and she glanced at Lena with haunted eyes. "Sit tight," she said, voice trembling. "Everything will be okay." Lena didn't believe her, not yet. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembered her father's face, calm, patient. He had taught her how to stay steady when machines failed, how to listen. She remembered the weekends at the hangar, greasy overalls, the smell of hydraulic fluid, and the endless afternoons spent by his side. He'd whispered once, "When things go wrong in the air, you can't panic. You need to think. You need to hear the machine." She opened her eyes. The cockpit door was still closed now. She could almost hear the hum of the pilots behind it as they worked frantically, trying to diagnose, trying to respond. A bead of sweat slid down her cheek. Her fingers wrapped tighter around the edge of the seat in front of her. The plane gave another shudder, and this one was stronger. The wings flexed visibly, bending downward for just a moment as though tasting failure. A collective gasp rose from the cabin. The lights in the overhead compartment flickered, and the panel above Lena rattled once, twice. She swallowed hard. Not far from her, a boy's phone slipped out of his pocket and clattered on the floor. Someone cursed. A woman prayed, crossing her fingers. Another man cried out, "Just land the plane." Lena didn't take her eyes off the wing. She measured how much it bent. She calculated quietly in her head, if the aileron is stuck, steering is compromised. If they can't steer, what can keep this plane from rolling? Her mind raced, looping between fear and determination. She was a kid, but she wasn't going to stay quiet. She had to try. She stood slowly, clutching the seat back in front of her for support. The plane lurched again, more violently this time, and she bit her lip to keep from screaming. Her classmates looked at her with confusion and terror. Mrs. Koenig leapt up, hand out, wanting to stop her. "Lena, sit down. This isn't safe," the teacher pleaded. Lena turned to her, voice steady but urgent. I have to talk to the pilots." Mrs. Koenig's face went pale. She hesitated for a long, horrible moment, then nodded. She stood aside, trembling. Other passengers froze. Nobody moved. They stared as Lena climbed over her seat and made her way toward the front of the cabin, little by little amid prayers and gasps. Each step felt like walking on glass. Her shoes made no sound, but her heart thundered like a war drum. When she reached the bulkhead, she pressed one hand against the cold metal wall. Through the little plexiglass window beside the cockpit door, she saw silhouettes. One of the captain, bent over a control panel, the other of his co-pilot, hands flying over switches. The red warning lights in the cockpit were glowing ominously, casting angry shadows across their faces. The cockpit door was shut. She couldn't see any open hatch, but she could hear voices, urgent, fearful, desperate. "Left system failing," she heard a voice say. "No manual backup. Hydraulics low." The words tumbled out fast, thick with stress. Her throat tightened. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Please, she whispered, tapping the door once gently, then harder. Please let me help. Inside, the voices paused. Then the door cracked open. The pilot's jaw set. His eyes widened for just a moment when he saw her. The co-pilot looked startled, like he half expected a flight attendant, not a child, to be on his doorstep. The man who had seemed so strong and composed just seconds ago now looked small in his own cockpit. His brow furrowed, sweat on his temple, his hands trembling. He cleared his throat. How did you know something was wrong?" he asked, voice rough. Her chest tightened. She felt vulnerable, exposed, but also powerful in a way she'd never felt before. She swallowed twice. "My dad's a mechanic. I watch planes a lot. I noticed something wrong with your left aileron." She pointed shakily toward the wing. He blinked. "From your seat." Lena nodded. He ran a hand through his hair. He was older than her father, maybe in his mid-40s, black hair flecked with gray. His uniform was stained in places, and she could see lines of fatigue around his eyes. "Come in," he said after a moment. He didn't sound confident, not yet, but he sounded willing. Lena followed him inside, stepping into the cramped cockpit with her heart pounding like machinery. The air smelled of faint burnt oil and electronics. Her sneakers made a soft thump on the cockpit floor. The co-pilot, a younger man with a thin mustache, looked at her like she was a hallucination. He swallowed hard, panting slightly, and blinked as if to clear his eyes. "Kid," he said finally, voice rough, "this is not normal. We can't afford miscalculations." Lena's knees felt weak, but she forced herself to stand straight. "I know," she whispered. She glanced at the readouts, the blinking red lights and the trembling throttle levers. "But I think I can help, please." The captain exchanged a quick, uncertain look with his co-pilot. Neither said anything. Then the captain nodded, as though she just asked him to land on the moon. He tapped the headset mic. "Brace yourself," he said to Lena softly, "and communicate with me. Tell me what you see, what you think is happening." The co-pilot moved over to one of the panels, his hands suddenly more deliberate, more careful. He pulled up a screen, twisted some knobs, tried to bring certain displays back to life. The captain steadied the yoke with all his strength. Lena swallowed. Her pulse was racing so hard she felt she could hear it in the earpiece of the cockpit. She leaned forward, placing a hand gently on the console, feeling the heat of electronics beneath. She studied the flight instruments, the warning lights, the hydraulic gauge flickering dangerously low. She spoke softly, tensely. "Hydraulic pressure on the left system is dropping. I think the crossover isn't engaging, and the aileron linkage on the left isn't responding properly." The co-pilot stared at her, eyes wide. The captain went quiet for a moment, then grabbed a switch and flipped it. A soft click echoed in the cockpit. Lena's heart pounded. She half expected something to explode. The hum of the engines felt different now, more fragile, more strained, like they were holding on by a thread. She said, "Try the manual backup, but isolate the left circuit." She held her breath. The captain nodded, thumbs trembling. He flicked another switch. For a moment everything stood still. Then the plane jolted again, this time violently. Red alarm lights flashed. The yoke vibrated under the pilot's grip. The co-pilot cursed under his breath. Lena gripped the edge of the console for support. She closed her eyes for just a second, forcing herself to calm down. "Think, Lena. Listen. Help." When she opened her eyes, she saw the captain's jaw set. He believed her, or at least, he was willing to try. "Okay," he said. "We're losing pressure too quickly, but I got something, a little response." He exhaled deeply as though fighting back fear. "It's minimal, not enough for full control, but something." Lena nodded, voice steady but soft. "We keep working. We use what we have. We try to balance with engine power if we need to." The co-pilot swallowed. "Differential thrust?" he asked quietly. Lena nodded again. "Yes. Use the right throttle a little more, left a little less. It's rough, but it can give you roll control." A bead of sweat slid down the captain's face. He looked at Lena, not with condescension, but with a strange mix of respect and disbelief. "You sure?" he asked. She took a breath. "I'm sure." He nodded. Then he turned back to the controls and whispered into the mic, "All right, differential thrust. Let's try it." The cockpit crackled with tension. The engines responded. The right one roared slightly, the left one ebbed. The plane shuddered. The controls felt alive again, but in a dangerous, ragged way. Through the little cockpit window she could glimpse the sky, the horizon shifting, rolling slightly. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And then, just as the plane seemed to stabilize for a heartbeat, another loud alarm blared. It was deeper this time, more threatening. The captain's eyes met Lena's for a fleeting second, and she saw the fear there. Not panic, but raw, sharp respect. He swallowed. "We just lost another hydraulic line," he said quietly. Lena's stomach twisted. She steadied her voice. "Okay, keep the differential thrust but reduce rate of descent. Try to stretch it out." He nodded, fingers flying over the throttle. The co-pilot worked the backup indicators, monitoring the dwindling pressure. The plane groaned as though it was being forced to do something it didn't want to. Lena closed her eyes, felt the vibration through the floor, and whispered a prayer. Not for help, she trusted she could do this, but for strength, for clarity, for the calm she needed to stay useful. She opened her eyes back at the instruments. The pressure gauge hovered dangerously low. Warning lights glowed red and orange. The yoke was shaking in the captain's grip. Outside, clouds scudded past like ghosts, and in her mind she saw her father's face, steady hands, calm voice. "Focus," he'd always said. "Machines tell you what's wrong if you listen." Lena listened. And as the co-pilot adjusted throttle settings, as the captain held the yoke, as the warnings blared, she stayed silent for a moment. A small, steady anchor in the raging storm. Then in her calmest voice she said, "All right, we're not out of the woods yet, but we're doing it. We're staying together, keep it steady." The captain exhaled. Sweat glistened on his forehead. The co-pilot nodded slowly. Outside, the wing still twitched, but it wasn't flailing. For a brief moment, Lena allowed herself a flicker of hope. But then the cabin jolted again, hard. Something new creaked, something broke. Lena looked from the instrument panel to the door behind her where her classmates sat, frozen, their faces pale. She swallowed, ready to speak the words she never thought she would. "I think something else is wrong," she whispered. And the captain turned to her, dread in his eyes, asking, "What do you mean?" Lena didn't answer right away. Her mind was racing, faster than she'd ever felt it race. She was about to respond when a sudden, sharp bang echoed in the cockpit. Suddenly she knew. Her voice trembled. "It's the engine." Bang that echoed through the cockpit wasn't like the others. It was deeper, thicker, like something important had snapped from the inside. The captain's hand flew instantly to the throttles. The co-pilot froze, his eyes darting across every instrument at once, searching for the one that would explain the noise. And Lena felt her stomach drop. "Check the right engine," she whispered. Even the pilots didn't need to be told twice. The captain threw a quick glance at the engine 2 gauge, his face tightening immediately. "Overheat." The word dropped from his lips like a death sentence. The co-pilot swore under his breath, flipping a row of switches with frantic precision. The temperature on the gauge spiked again, the red line trembling at its limit. Lena stepped forward, swallowing hard. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was. "You can't cut it," she said quietly. "Not yet." Both pilots turned to her like she had said something impossible. The captain narrowed his eyes. "If I don't shut that engine down soon, it could." "I know." She breathed in, forcing herself to be brave. "But if you shut it down now, you lose almost all your steering. You can't hold level flight with only the left engine, not with the aileron gone." The co-pilot ran a hand through his hair hard enough to pull strands loose. That's insane. She's a child. She doesn't know what we're working with. The captain didn't answer him. His eyes stayed locked on Lena, studying her, measuring her. Finally, he whispered, "Kid, what do you know about planes?" Lena didn't hesitate. "My dad's an aircraft mechanic. I've spent years watching him work. I know what a failing aileron sounds like. I know what hydraulics do to the controls. I know how engines respond under uneven load." She pointed to the vibrating throttle. "And I know that if you shut that engine down, this plane will roll left so hard we'll never recover." The cockpit fell silent. The captain looked at her, not like a kid, but like another crew member. The co-pilot stared stunned, mouth slightly open. Outside the window, clouds drifted fast. Too fast. The horizon dipped unevenly, the whole world tilting left as the aircraft struggled to stay level. The captain swallowed. "All right, then tell me what you think we do." Lena took a trembling breath. "Focus, Lena. Listen to the machine." She looked at the engine readouts, heat climbing, pressure dropping. She looked at the wing still trembling, aileron deadweight. She looked at the pilot, scared, exhausted, trying not to show it. What she said next came out in a whisper. "You keep using the engine just enough to fight the roll, but not so much it overheats faster. You have to balance it." The co-pilot exhaled sharply. That's threading a needle." Lena shook her head. "No, it's threading a needle during an earthquake." The captain didn't flinch. He pushed the throttle slightly forward. The engine howled, hesitated, then steadied barely. The plane leveled a little. Not perfectly, not safely. But enough. The co-pilot looked at Lena again, more carefully this time. "You really noticed all that from your seat?" Lena nodded. "I was watching the wing." He let out a hollow laugh. "We've had grown adults in this cockpit who don't watch wings that closely." She didn't react. She couldn't. The cockpit's warning chime began again, long, urgent, unignorable. Ding, 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 ding. The captain checked the new flashing light. His face went pale. Hydraulic reservoir 2 just started leaking. The co-pilot closed his eyes. That's the redundant backup. Lena's heart hammered so hard she felt it in her teeth. The captain steadied the yoke. The plane drifted left again. "How fast is it leaking?" he asked. The co-pilot read the digits aloud. Lena did the math in her head, faster than she ever had in school. At the current leak rate. At the altitude they were losing. At the engine's overheating cycle. She forced herself to meet the captain's eyes. "You have maybe 15 minutes of meaningful control left." Silence. The kind of silence that eats the air. The captain didn't shout. He didn't panic. He didn't argue. He simply said, "Then we use every one of them." He grabbed the radio. "Mayday, mayday, mayday." The co-pilot continued the call-out, voice trembling. "Charter 4575, hydraulic failure, partial aileron failure, engine overheat, attempting emergency descent." Lena stood perfectly still. Her legs shook. Her throat tightened. But her mind stayed sharp. The captain looked at her again. "You said your dad's a mechanic. You ever see a linkage failure?" "Yes," Lena said. "Once." Her voice was barely a whisper. "It looked like this." The captain nodded slowly, eyes full of something that wasn't fear anymore. "Trust." He pointed to the instrument panel. "You keep watching those gauges. Tell me the second anything shifts." Lena nodded and moved closer. Below them, the world tilted slowly. Forests, roads, rivers creeping into view through the clouds as the plane descended. Far behind them in the cabin she could hear faint muffled cries. Someone praying, someone screaming, someone begging for updates. She wished she could comfort them. But right now she had one job. Suddenly, the right engine sputtered. Just once. Just enough to make everyone jerk. The co-pilot's hand darted toward the shutdown switch. No, Lena cried. He froze. She pointed toward the temperature gauge. It surged from turbulence, not because it's dying. Give it 3 seconds, watch. 1, 2, 3. The temperature dipped by a few degrees. The co-pilot blinked at her like she just predicted the future. What the hell? The captain didn't let him finish. Kid, he said quietly, you stay right here. And then, for the first time, he allowed the fear in his voice to show. Because right now, you may be the only reason we're still in the air. Lena swallowed. Her thoughts raced faster than the plane. Her heart pounded. Her palms were slick with sweat. But she nodded. She wasn't running. She wasn't crying. She wasn't looking away. She'd grown up watching machines break and be fixed. Now she was inside one breaking mid-flight. She steadied herself. And then, a new alarm flashed. Not engine. Not hydraulics. Electrical. The co-pilot gasped. Oh God, BuzzFeed 2 just dropped. The captain turned to Lena, eyes wide. What does that mean? She whispered. The pilot answered, voice grim. It means we're starting to lose electricity, and when that happens, the lights flickered violently. We lose everything else. And once again, Lena felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The cockpit lights flickered so hard the shadows jumped across the walls like they were alive. One violent flash. 2. And then everything snapped to dim emergency power. The soft red glow giving the cockpit the feeling of a submarine sinking too deep. The hum of the avionics lowered, a sick, tired sound. Lena felt her breath stop. The co-pilot slapped the electrical panel with an open palm. Come on, don't do this now. But the captain wasn't panicking. He was staring straight ahead, jaw set tight, knuckles white on the yoke. Electrical bus 2 is failing, he said quietly, like he didn't want the words to exist. What does that mean? Lena whispered. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at anything except the horizon, now tipping unevenly as if the plane itself were losing consciousness. It means the systems we have left are about to start shutting down. The co-pilot swallowed hard, one by one. Lena's heartbeat thumped so loudly she was sure they could hear it. What systems? Both pilots exchanged the kind of look adults use when they have to decide how much truth a child can survive. But Lena wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was their third crew member. The captain turned to her. Autopilot is gone. The navigation screens might follow. Lights, cabin pressure indicators, internal comms, we could lose any of it at any moment. And the hydraulics? Lena asked. The co-pilot answered this time. If the pumps lose power, the reservoir won't matter. We'll lose control entirely. Lena's stomach twisted. So what do we do? The captain tightened his grip on the yoke. We descend fast. He dipped the plane's nose, carefully, so carefully. The aircraft reacted sluggishly, as if half asleep. We need denser air, he explained. At lower altitude, the remaining controls respond better. If we lose power up here, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Lena understood. The sky outside was still bright, still blue. But the cockpit felt like storm clouds closing in from the inside out. The co-pilot checked the altimeter, passing 11,000, rate of descent steady. Lena braced herself against a vibrating console as the aircraft shuddered again. That wasn't normal turbulence. That was the plane fighting its own failing parts. The captain raised his voice. Charter 4575 descending through 11,000. Electrical instability. Request immediate vectors for emergency landing. A crackled response came through radio static. Copy that 4575. Radar shows you drifting slightly off course. Correct 2 degrees right. The captain nudged the yoke gently. The plane didn't move. He nudged harder. Still nothing. Then slowly, painfully, the aircraft leaned right, but too far. Too much. He pulled it back left, cursing under his breath. The co-pilot glared at the instrument panel. The rudder's lagging. Hydraulics are draining faster under descent load. Lena's brain raced. If you can stabilize it at a shallow bank, the plane won't fight you as hard. The captain didn't question her. He adjusted gently, settling the aircraft into the most fragile balance imaginable, a rightward drift so subtle it barely counted as turning. That's something, he muttered. But their relief evaporated instantly. Beep, beep, beep. A new warning. The kind that meant danger deep enough to sink a ship. The co-pilot's eyes shot wide. Oh no, we lost one of the attitude indicators. Lena stared at the display. The artificial horizon on the right screen was frozen completely, the little airplane symbol locked at a flat line. That's lying to us, she said softly. The captain nodded. From now on, we trust only the left display. The co-pilot muttered, if that one goes, we're flying blind. Flying blind. The words echoed in Lena's mind like a horror script. The captain hit the intercom. His voice was tight but steady. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're experiencing an electrical issue. Please remain seated and keep your seat belts fastened. Lena could almost hear the panic spreading through the cabin like fire on dry grass. Gasped cries, whispered prayers. She wished she could go back there. To comfort her mom. To tell her everything would be okay, even if she wasn't sure. But she stayed in the cockpit. The co-pilot checked the gauges again. Hydraulics down another 5%. The captain's jaw clenched. We're running out of time. Lena leaned closer to the front windows. Below them, the world was getting visible. Patches of land, roads, fields, tiny farmhouses scattered like freckles on the earth. Where the airport, she whispered. The co-pilot zoomed the navigation map manually, the screen flickering with each adjustment. There, he said finally, pointing at a blinking green triangle, about 12 minutes out. 12 minutes. But their hydraulics had maybe, what? 8. 9. Lena didn't say it out loud. The cockpit groaned again. Something metallic deep in the fuselage let out a grinding sound. The captain stiffened. Did you hear that? Lena nodded. That wasn't the engine. It was the stabilizer, the co-pilot said, barely breathing. It's straining. Everything was straining. The plane. The systems. The pilots. Lena's courage. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining her dad working late in the hangar, grease on his hands, explaining how aircraft are alive in their own way, how they talk when they're in trouble. Right now, this one was screaming. When she opened her eyes, something changed outside the window. The sky. It darkened, not from weather, but from their descent into a lower layer of thick gray haze. Clouds swallowed them whole. Visibility dropped instantly. The pilots both tensed. We just lost visual, the co-pilot whispered. Lena pressed her forehead almost against the glass. Nothing. Just swirling gray, all directions, like they were flying through wet cement. How long until we're below the cloud deck? She asked. Too long, the captain replied, and we're descending blind until then. Suddenly, flash. The left screen, the one functioning attitude indicator, flickered. Just flickered. But that was enough to make every muscle in Lena's body turn to stone. "Please tell me it didn't just do that," the co-pilot said, voice breaking. The captain licked his lips. "Keep your eyes on it if that fails." The screen flickered again. The co-pilot grabbed the console like he was holding on for life. "No, no, no, hold together, please." Lena whispered the same thing under her breath. And then, the horizon line on the screen blinked off. Dark. Gone. The co-pilot let out a sound halfway between a gasp and a sob. The captain's voice dropped to a whisper Lena would never forget. "We've lost our last attitude indicator." Lena felt it then. The first true spike of fear, so sharp it stole her breath. "Captain," she whispered, "how do we know which way is up?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. The gray outside the window thickened. The cockpit dimmed further. The plane drifted slightly, unseen, unfelt. And for the first time since she entered the cockpit, Lena realized they were no longer flying the plane. The plane was flying them. And then, a sudden, violent lurch threw them all sideways. The captain screamed, "We're rolling!" And the world tilted. Hard, vast, and completely blind. The cockpit tilted so sharply that Lena's feet lifted off the floor. The world spun, a blur of gray clouds streaking past the windows, as the plane rolled dangerously to the right. The captain fought the yoke with both hands, teeth clenched, muscles burning. "It's not responding. Hydraulics are dropping too fast." The co-pilot's voice cracked. "We're in an uncontrolled bank, 40 degrees 45. Lena grabbed the nearest seat frame to keep herself from sliding. Her stomach rose into her throat. Her vision blurred from the sudden G-forces, pressing her sideways as if the plane wanted to shake her loose. The captain shouted over the alarms. "Counter-rotate, full left input." The yoke was pulled nearly to the limit. Nothing but the groan of mechanical systems failing under the strain. "We're not leveling," the co-pilot yelled. And then Lena saw it. The altimeter spinning down faster, faster. "We're losing altitude too quickly," she cried. The captain didn't answer. He was too busy trying to keep the plane from flipping onto its back. The co-pilot slammed his palm against the dead screen. "We need an attitude reference. We need anything." But the sky outside was just a solid sheet of gray, spinning so violently it looked like a blender filled with storm clouds. Lena's brain raced through every memory, every moment in her father's hangar. Not electronics. Not screens. Not computers. Basic flight. Old school flight. "The turn coordinator," she shouted. The co-pilot jolted. "What?" She pointed at the small, round, analog instrument halfway down the panel. The one most modern pilots barely looked at anymore. "That gauge, it's mechanical, not digital. It doesn't need the electrical bus." Her voice cracked. "It still works." The captain snapped his eyes to the gauge. It wasn't perfect. The tiny airplane symbol was shaking, the ball swaying violently in its tube. But it was alive. "We have a reference," the captain breathed. "It's enough." He pulled hard left again. The plane resisted, groaned, shuddered. And then slowly, painfully, the roll eased. Not completely. Not safely. But from a deadly spiral to a survivable tilt. The co-pilot exhaled so sharply it was almost a sob. "We're still descending, but at least we're not flipping." Lena held onto her seat frame, knuckles white. The blur outside slowed, from tornado to thunderstorm to heavy fog. Her vision steadied. She could hear her own heart beat again. Then, beep, beep, beep. Another alarm. The co-pilot checked it, face falling. Hydraulic pressure at 9%. The captain swore quietly. We're turning into a brick. Lena's breath came shallow. How long do we have? Minutes, the co-pilot whispered. Maybe. The captain scanned the limited instruments still working. We need to descend through this cloud layer. If we can get visual with the ground, any ground, we have a chance. The co-pilot adjusted the trim manually, one of the few functions still responding. Even that wheel turned sluggishly, like it didn't want to cooperate. Lena stared ahead. The gray was thinning. Barely, but enough to see blurred shadows below, dark shapes, like massive ink stains on the earth. Are those hills? She whispered. Mountains, the co-pilot corrected grimly. We're over the Appalachian foothills. The captain's eyes widened. If we come out of the clouds too low. Lena finished his sentence. We'll hit them before we see them. The plane kept descending. 9,000 feet. 8,000. 7,000. The turn coordinator wobbled again, threatening another uncontrolled bank. The captain steadied it with tiny, gentle corrections. Every movement was delicate, deliberate, like holding a wounded animal that could lash out at any second. Lena wiped sweat from her brow. Captain, what altitude do we need for safe terrain clearance? 4,000 minimum, he said. But that assumes straight, level flight, which we do not have. The co-pilot wiped his eyes, not tears, sweat, stress, terror. But he still tried to lighten the moment. Well, on the bright side, at least the oxygen masks didn't drop down. Lena's voice was quiet. That's because the sensor lost power. The co-pilot blinked. Oh right, that's less comforting. The plane jolted again, hard, like something heavy had slammed into the fuselage. The captain instinctively braced. What the? The co-pilot checked the last working airspeed indicator. It's wind shear in the cloud layer, he said. And the aircraft can't compensate without full control surfaces. Lena felt it too. The plane being pushed, pulled, grabbed by invisible hands. The right wing dipped. The nose swayed left. The plane wanted to spin again. The captain corrected, just barely. We can't stay in this cloud deck, he said. We need visual now. Lena squeezed the window frame, staring desperately through the fog. And then, a sudden break. Not much. Just a thin slash torn through the clouds by the wind. Sunlight stabbed through. Golden, blinding, radiant. There, Lena shouted. The captain dipped the nose slightly. Another break in the clouds opened. Below them, trees. A whole ocean of them. Endless forest. No city. No runway. No clearing big enough to land. Just wilderness. The co-pilot swallowed hard. We're too far from the airport. How far? Lena whispered. Too far. The captain didn't hesitate. Find me a valley, a road, a river, anything long enough to set down. The co-pilot leaned over the window, searching desperately as they cleared more cloud patches. More forest. More rolling hills. No civilization. Lena's stomach turned. We might have to land in the trees. No, the captain said firmly. Not unless there's absolutely no other choice. Hydraulics, 7%. The captain saw it. He pushed the aircraft lower, faster. Break through the cloud deck, he murmured. That's our only hope. Lena watched the altimeter spinning. 6,000. 5,000. Clouds still thick. No full visual. 4,800 feet. The plane trembled again, another mechanical groan echoing through the fuselage. Hydraulics at 6%, the co-pilot shouted. The captain didn't blink. Break through the clouds. 4,500. 4,200. Lena whispered, "Come on, come on." And then, the plane burst out of the cloud layer like a submarine, breaking the surface. Sunlight flooded the cockpit. The pilots blinked hard. Lena gasped, because what lay below them, stretching for miles, was both a miracle and a nightmare. A massive transmission tower, directly ahead, rising from a hilltop, and they were flying straight toward it. Every nerve in Lena's body fired at once. "Captain, look out," she screamed. He looked up, and his face went white as bone. The tower filled the windshield, growing larger, closer, too fast. The captain yanked the failing controls, and the plane responded. Barely, the transmission tower rose like a steel monster from the forest below. Its lattice of metal cut sharply against the golden sunlight, glinting like jagged teeth. Lena's stomach twisted as her eyes followed the narrowing gap between the plane and the structure. The captain yanked the yoke left, forcing the plane into a shallow bank, but the sluggish controls groaned in protest. The co-pilot shouted as the aircraft shuddered violently. "Hydraulics 5%. Lena's hands gripped the console, knuckles white, as the plane tilted dangerously toward the treetops. The tower loomed closer. Every second stretched like an eternity. She could see the bolts, the crossbeams, the insulators glinting in the sun. The forest blurred below, the ground rushing up far too fast. "Brace yourself," the captain said, voice grim. He had that tight line of determination across his face, the one Lena had seen in fighters and hangar floors alike. He was not giving up. The co-pilot adjusted the throttles, trying to balance the weakening left engine with the overworked right. The plane groaned. The vibrations shook every bone in Lena's body. Lena swallowed hard. She forced herself to think, focused. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Listen, watch, predict. A machine will tell you what it needs if you pay attention." She leaned forward. Her eyes traced the aileron, still frozen. The left wing dipped ever so slightly more than the right. The tower, it was coming up faster. "Captain," she whispered, voice tight, "we need a steeper turn, bank harder. Use differential thrust. Right engine more, left engine less. It's the only way to pull away." The co-pilot froze, eyes wide. "You're telling him to fight the roll with just the engines?" "Yes," Lena said. "It's all we have. The plane will respond if we're careful." The captain hesitated. He looked at her, 12 years old, soaked in sweat, hair plastered to her forehead, eyes sharp and unflinching. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't frozen. She was analyzing, calculating, commanding. He took a deep breath. "Differential thrust it is." He nudged the throttles, carefully modulating power. The right engine roared, the left countered, and the aircraft started to pivot painfully, inch by inch. The shuddering lessened. The nose rose slightly. The treetops below slipped away. The transmission tower was still massive. Too close, far too close. "Hold it," Lena shouted, heart pounding. The plane wobbled. One of the stabilizers groaned, a long metallic screech that made every passenger in the cabin freeze in terror. 3% hydraulic pressure, the co-pilot yelled. "We're losing it." The captain swore under his breath. The yoke shook in his hands. The plane groaned. The wingtip was dangerously close to the tower. Lena's mind raced. "We need more vertical separation. Faster. Predict the pull of gravity, the drag of the air, the sluggish response." "Pull slightly back on the yoke, lightly," she barked. He obeyed. The nose of the plane lifted, barely enough to clear the top of the tower. A screeching sound filled the cockpit. The tip of the left wing scraped against the outermost guy wire of the tower. Sparks flew. The metallic shriek echoed through the fuselage. The co-pilot cursed, "God damn it." Lena's stomach lurched. Sparks were falling from the wingtip. The plane shivered violently. Keep going, she yelled. Don't overcorrect. The captain gritted his teeth, muscles straining. The engines roared under the impossible load. The left wing flexed like a rubber band threatening to snap. The plane twisted in midair, almost sideways, almost upside down. And then, the right engine sputtered. The co-pilot slammed the throttle. No, no, no. But it wasn't enough. The engine stuttered, coughed, and dropped a few hundred RPM. The nose pitched dangerously. The trees below rushed up. Lena's hands were clenched around the console. She felt her heart in her throat. Use rudder, she screamed. Compensate, compensate. The captain yanked the pedals. The tail wobbled. The plane shivered. The engines roared in uneven harmony. A blinding spark flew from the left wing again. The fuselage groaned in protest. The co-pilot screamed over the alarms. And then, the wingtip cleared. The tower flashed past the window. Sparks rained downward. The plane shook violently, but they survived. The cabin jolted. Children screamed. Mrs. Koenig grabbed a student's arm, tears streaming down her face. Lena's knees nearly gave out, but she gritted her teeth. She had to stay upright. She had to stay alive. The captain didn't speak for a moment. He just breathed slow, deep. His knuckles unclenched the yoke slightly. We made it, he whispered, almost in disbelief. The co-pilot slumped against the panel. I can't believe that just. Lena interrupted, voice strong. We're not done. The captain looked at her. The co-pilot turned toward her. She pointed down at the horizon, where patches of green forest gave way to jagged hills. We need to find a clearing. We're too far from the airport. The plane, it won't hold out much longer. The captain nodded slowly. He studied the terrain. His eyes widened. There, he shouted, pointing. That road straight line, about 2 miles long. We can attempt a forced landing. The co-pilot's face went pale. Are you insane? That road's narrow, surrounded by trees. I don't care, the captain said. It's the only shot we have. Lena's pulse raced. Every warning alarm, every groan of the failing aircraft, every threat from the clouds and mountains reminded her. There was no margin for error. The plane pitched forward slightly. The engine screamed under the strain. Hydraulic pressure, 2%. She could feel it in her gut. The left aileron was completely dead. The rudder was barely responding. The wings groaned like tortured metal. The road grew beneath them, straight, narrow, surrounded by forest on both sides. Lena held her breath. The captain leveled the plane, carefully adjusting the throttles, using every ounce of strength to keep the aircraft balanced. The co-pilot whispered, voice trembling, we might just make it. But Lena knew better. There was no room for mistakes. One wrong move, one gust of wind, one sudden twitch in the failing metal. And the plane would become another twisted wreck among the trees. She tightened her fists. She couldn't close her eyes. She couldn't breathe too deeply. Every second counted. The transmission tower was behind them. The forest surrounded them. The road, a ribbon of possible salvation, stretched ahead. And Lena realized something she hadn't thought about until this moment. This was her moment. Her knowledge, her calm, her instincts. The fate of the plane, every life on board, was resting in her 12-year-old hands. The engines roared, the fuselage shivered, the co-pilot muttered prayers under his breath. And then, just as the road came fully into view, perfectly aligned with the nose of the plane, something snapped. A sharp metallic crack. The left wing flexed violently. The plane trembled. The road was close. Too close. And Lena knew. They were not out of danger yet. The plane shuddered violently, as if protesting the impossible demands placed on it. Lena's stomach lurched. Her hands clutched the console so tightly her knuckles turned white. The road stretched below like a thin silver ribbon slicing through the endless green forest. Narrow, straight, but not wide enough for comfort. One wrong angle, one wobble in the failing wings, and they would plow into the trees. The captain's face was pale under the glow of the cockpit instruments. Sweat ran down his temples, catching the dim red light. "Hold steady," he murmured. His hands hovered over the yoke, trembling slightly. The co-pilot adjusted the throttles for the 100th time. The plane groaned in response, vibrating like a living thing in agony. Lena studied the ailerons, still frozen, completely unresponsive. The rudder and stabilizers barely functioned. The engines roared unevenly, one threatening to fail at any moment. Hydraulic pressure, 1%. She swallowed hard, 1%. "Captain," she whispered, voice tight, "we're almost there. Don't overcorrect. Use subtle inputs. The engines, you can balance the roll with them, just like before the tower." He nodded, lips pressed thin. He glanced at the co-pilot. "Differential thrust," the co-pilot repeated, voice shaky. "Right more, left less." "Yes," Lena said firmly, "we can do this." The plane dipped slightly. The left wing scraped against a gust of turbulent air. Sparks flew again, lighting up the cockpit like fireflies. Below, the road was getting closer. She could see the edges lined with trees, small rocks, and the occasional power pole. No room for error. She gritted her teeth. The cabin behind them was silent now. Mrs. Koenig had a student's hand in hers, gripping so tightly the knuckles were white. Others clutched seatbacks, faces pale, eyes wide. The only sounds were the groan of stressed metal, the roar of engines, and the quick, shallow breathing of frightened passengers. 400 feet, the co-pilot whispered, almost in disbelief. 300, Lena added, scanning the limited instruments and the visual below. The captain's hand trembled on the yoke. "We're too high," he muttered. "We might overshoot, but if I pull too hard—" "Don't," Lena said sharply. "Let the engines do the work. Subtle, balance. Don't fight the plane, trust the differential thrust." He nodded again. The plane groaned as he eased the yoke back slightly, letting the nose descend at a controlled rate. Trees loomed dangerously on both sides. The road looked impossibly narrow. Lena's pulse raced. She could see small shadows moving along the side, maybe animals startled by the approaching aircraft. 200 feet, the co-pilot breathed. The left wing trembled. A metallic groan echoed through the fuselage. Sparks flew from a stressed joint. "Keep going," Lena whispered almost to herself. "You've got this, keep it straight." The captain's hands were white on the yoke. He adjusted the rudder slightly. The plane began a delicate glide over the forest canopy. 100 feet, Lena said, heart hammering. The treetops rushed closer, their dark green limbs reaching up like fingers trying to grab the plane. The co-pilot's eyes were wide with terror. "We're too high." "Lower," Lena ordered. "Nose down gently. Use the engines to stabilize." The plane dipped slightly. The treetops vanished beneath them, replaced by the narrow strip of road. Lena's breath caught. The road was lined with small rocks and debris. Not smooth, not forgiving. Every misalignment could be catastrophic. 50 feet, she whispered. "Now control, balance, gentle." The captain adjusted the yoke minutely. The engines roared in protest but responded. The plane wobbled slightly left, right, but Lena's instructions, shouted over the alarms, kept them from spiraling. 20 feet, she said, teeth clenched. "Hold it steady." The road rushed closer. The passengers in the cabin were frozen, gripping whatever they could. Mrs. Koenig whispered prayers under her breath. Lena could see the terror in every face, the raw fear of 12-year-olds staring death in the eye. The plane shivered violently. Sparks flew from the left wingtip again. A gust of wind rocked them. The left engine coughed. The right threatened to stall. Lena's hands shook, but her mind was sharp. "Hold the nose slightly up," she yelled. "Balance the roll, don't let the wings touch the trees." The captain obeyed, muscles straining. The co-pilot's fingers flew over the throttle. The engines roared unevenly, straining to keep the plane stable. The road grew beneath them, impossibly narrow. Lena could see the faint shadows of guardrails, rocks, and broken signs. One miscalculation, one slight wobble, and they would be destroyed. 10 feet. The plane trembled violently. Sparks from the stressed wingtip lit the cockpit like lightning. The engine screamed. The left wing threatened to dip. 5 feet. The co-pilot whispered, voice breaking, We're going to make it." Lena didn't breathe. She kept her eyes on the road. She could see small patches of dirt where the road was eroded, one section slightly raised, a hazard. The captain's hands moved like a dancer, adjusting, nudging, coaxing the plane onto the perfect glide path. 3 feet. 2 feet. The plane's tires were almost touching the asphalt. Sparks flew as the wings flexed and scraped small branches at the road edges. Lena's voice rose, fierce and steady. "Hold it straight, balance with the engines." The plane shuddered violently. The left landing gear scraped a small rock. The fuselage trembled. And then, contact. The tires hit the road. The plane bounced slightly, skidding over small rocks and debris. The co-pilot yelled, "We're down, we're on the road." The captain fought to keep the plane straight, nudging the rudder, balancing with differential thrust. Sparks flew as the wings flexed against overhanging branches. The passengers screamed, some with relief, some with terror. Lena pressed herself against the console. Her heart raced. Her stomach dropped. Every nerve in her body was on fire. The plane skidded along the narrow road. The engines roared unevenly, one threatening to fail completely. And then, the plane's left wing hit a tree branch. A sharp metallic groan filled the cockpit. The right wing scraped a rock. The fuselage shuddered violently. But still they kept moving. The road twisted slightly, the plane bouncing violently. The passengers screamed again. Almost clear, hold it," Lena shouted. The plane surged forward. The forest blurred past the edges. The road widened slightly. The co-pilot whispered, almost in disbelief, we might actually make it." The captain didn't answer. His focus was absolute, unwavering, every movement precise, every adjustment life or death. The plane jolted violently again. Another branch grazed the left wing. But then, finally, the road stretched open. Straight, clear enough to stop. The captain exhaled, slowly, careful not to overcorrect. The plane skidded to a stop. Silence. Not complete silence, engines still humming, systems still failing, but the terror of the flight had paused. Lena's legs shook. She pressed her hands to her face. She could hardly breathe. Behind her, the passengers began to move, whispering, crying, gripping each other. Relief mixed with shock. The co-pilot slumped in his seat. We survived." The captain exhaled, voice hoarse. "Thanks to her, she kept us alive." Lena stared at him, heart hammering, tears threatening to fall. She had just saved a plane, 12 years old, alone, calm, commanding. But then something sharp, metallic, deep inside the fuselage, let out a groan. And Lena realized the plane was barely holding together. The road had saved them for now. But their nightmare wasn't over. The tires screamed against the narrow road as the plane skidded along, metal scraping branches, rocks bouncing against the fuselage. Sparks flew from stressed joints, lighting the interior like fireworks. Lena's stomach was in her throat. Every nerve screamed, "Don't stop, don't slow, keep it straight." The captain fought the yoke like a man holding back a tidal wave. The co-pilot adjusted throttles, keeping differential thrust just enough to maintain balance. The road ahead widened slightly. Lena's eyes scanned every inch. Dirt patches, fallen branches, rocks, nothing could be ignored. 30 feet, Lena whispered, breath trembling. 20, 19, 18 steady. The plane shuddered violently. Sparks from the left wingtip arced into the air. The fuselage groaned as the landing gear scraped unevenly over rocks. Suddenly, a low, deep crack reverberated through the fuselage. The left engine coughed violently, smoke curling from its cowling. "Engine 2, flame out imminent," the co-pilot shouted. The captain didn't flinch. He eased the throttle, nudged the rudder, coaxing the failing machine along the narrow path. 10 feet, Lena said, voice tight. "Steady, balance with the engines. 1, 2. The tires touched a smooth section of asphalt. The plane jolted slightly, but the captain held it straight. Sparks from branches still flew, but the worst was over. 5 feet, she whispered, almost clear. The plane skidded past the last trees lining the road. A stretch of clear asphalt lay ahead, perhaps 50 yards long, enough for them to finally stop. The captain adjusted the throttle one last time, the co-pilot bracing. "Hold it steady now," Lena shouted. The plane lurched forward. The engine screamed, metal groaned. Then the friction of the tires slowed them gradually. "Stop!" The plane shuddered, trembled, and came to a complete halt. Silence. Not the quiet of peace, but of disbelief. Lena pressed her hands to the console, legs trembling. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it would burst. The co-pilot leaned back in his seat, head falling against the panel. We actually made it." The captain exhaled slowly, voice shaking. "Thanks to her, she kept us alive." Lena turned toward him, breath ragged. Her cheeks were wet with sweat and tears. "You did all the thinking," the captain said quietly. "All the calculations. You guided us every move. Without you, we wouldn't have survived." Her stomach tightened. She was just a kid, 12 years old. But at that moment, she realized something had changed forever. Behind her, the cabin erupted into cautious, trembling applause. Mrs. Koenig hugged her students, whispering words of comfort, relief, and disbelief. Parents held their children, tears streaming, shaking. Every face told the same story. They had just escaped death. Lena slumped against the console, chest heaving. She stared out the windshield at the road ahead, the surrounding forest, the fatting treetops. The plane was battered, scratched, burned in spots, but it was intact. Somehow, miraculously intact. The co-pilot spoke again, still staring at the gauges. "We're lucky this road was here by inches. We'd be dead in the forest." Lena didn't respond. She felt numb. She thought of the tower, the clouds, the spinning, rolling, tumbling plane, the loss of hydraulics, the fatting electrical systems, the nearly frozen altitude indicators. She had held it together. She had done it. The captain reached over, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You kept us alive. Not just me, not just him. You saved everyone." Tears rolled down Lena's cheeks. She shook her head. I just did what I knew." The co-pilot finally looked at her, voice trembling. "Kid, you just did the impossible. You saved us all. Every single person on this plane. That was beyond incredible." Lena allowed herself a shaky laugh, but it was short, swallowed by the sheer exhaustion and adrenaline coursing through her body. From the cabin, students and adults began to file out, cautiously stepping onto the road, scanning the forest, the plane, the damage. Some hugged Lena. Others cried. She felt hands on her shoulders, voices whispering, "Thank you, thank you." The plane sat on the narrow road, wings flexed, engines hissing. Smoke trailed from the left engine cowling. The left wingtip was scorched where it had hit branches. The fuselage had dents and scratches, but it was whole. The forest was eerily silent. Not a bird, not a rustle, just the hum of the cooling engines and the shallow breathing of survivors. Lena slowly climbed down from the cockpit, knees weak. The captain followed, co-pilot beside him. "Let's get everyone off the plane," the captain said, voice calm but firm. "Emergency services will be here soon, but we need to make sure no one else gets hurt." The group moved carefully along the side of the plane. Lena helped the younger students. They shuffled, tired and trembling, into the clearing near the road. She stopped, looking back at the aircraft. The battered, stressed metal beast that had just tried to kill them and had somehow, against all odds, survived. Her mind replayed the flight. The tower, the clouds, the spirals, the failing engines, the frozen instruments. Every moment, every calculation, every choice. She had been terrified, but she had also been calm, focused, brave. A rescue helicopter's distant thump finally echoed through the valley. Emergency vehicles followed shortly after, headlights piercing the forest. A paramedic approached Lena, kneeling to meet her eyes. "You saved lives today. Do you understand that?" She nodded, voice barely a whisper. I think so." The captain put an arm around her shoulders. "You did more than think. You acted. You were in control when everyone else was losing theirs. That takes courage most adults don't have. You've just earned a place in aviation history." Lena's chest swelled with emotion, pride, relief, exhaustion, but also a quiet understanding. She had changed. She was no longer just a kid. The co-pilot added, voice low, "We will tell everyone what happened here today. The world needs to know that a 12-year-old just guided a plane to safety when every system failed." The forest around them remained silent, the crash averted by inches, by intuition, by courage. Lena looked up at the sky, golden and calm now. The clouds had parted, sunlight glinting off the trees and the narrow road that had saved them. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "We made it." The captain, co-pilot, and rescue teams gathered around her. They lifted her into a protective, almost reverent embrace. The passengers, students, and teacher followed, surrounding her. In that moment, amidst the wrecked plane and the forest clearing, Lena realized she had done something extraordinary. She had faced the impossible and survived. And for the first time, she allowed herself a deep, shuddering breath. The plane behind her was battered, yes, but it was alive. So was she. And the world would never forget the kid who saved a plane when the sky itself seemed determined to tear it apart. As helicopters landed, lights flashed, and first responders approached, Lena stood tall, tiny but unbroken, the calm center in the eye of a storm that could have consumed them all. She had flown through chaos. She had stared death in the face. And she had won. The plane, the passengers, and Lena herself, together, had survived the impossible. And as the sun glinted off the twisted, battered wings, Lena knew one thing with clarity. She would never be just a kid again. The world had watched. And the world had seen a hero.